Evening all. Now, in these uncertain times of indefinite lockdown, I think I need a project to stop me going completely nuts. Now, as you know, recently I have been learning to scratch build. I built this Cornish fisherman's chapel, for instance. And what I thought was, why not build an entire layout? So I've been rummaging around, and let me show you what I've found. I'm a poet and I'm fully aware of the fact. Now, I found a shelf in the cupboard, and I'm thinking a narrow gauge micro layout. I'm going for what they call an ingle nook, which is basically a three-siding shunting puzzle. And the idea is that this will be based loosely, more inspired by St Ives in Cornwall. It's going to be 009 narrow gauge. St Ives never had a narrow gauge railway, to my knowledge. But I think I could plausibly argue for the existence of one in my little Cornish town. Now, the basics of what I want are, as I say, Cornish fishing port inspired by St Ives. I'm thinking at the moment that I'd like to set it kind of in the early 50s when the line is run down, but I'm kind of imagining that, like the Tallyllin, it gets preserved. The kind of scenario that I've created for it is that in St Ives they have this little problem where the streets are very narrow and very crowded, so it's really hard to get around there with a car. In fact, their branch line is actually, I understand, quite profitable due to the fact that there's a park and ride service that is pretty much a necessity if you're going to St Ives. Like the trains there get absolutely, rush hour on the Northern Line level packed. It's astonishing. I've never seen anything like it. The idea behind this is that this town has a similar deal, but it never got its own branch line. And what has happened is a narrow gauge tramway was built through the town to the quay to serve the fishing industry, and to link with whatever the nearest standard gauge railhead would be. Which is, well, by happy coincidence, I already have a couple of 009 tram engines. What these are is they're actually built on the old Cato four-wheel chassis. There we go. Let's take that one off. This is a very popular chassis with 009 modelers. It's a great way of getting started. They took it out of production and they produced a new version, which I think is produced under the number 1109. But yeah, it's perfect for tram engines like this. What I want is to keep things fairly freelance. Like, one thing I don't really like on a lot of narrow gauge railways, and this is my own personal opinion, is that oftentimes the locos and rolling stock are very much from a particular line, whereas in reality with narrow gauge lines there was no real standardization between lines. Like, each line had its own locomotives, its own rolling stock. Fortunately, these are freelance, These are 3D prints by TB on Shapeways, that's Tebee. I have these coaches, which are freelance by Parkside Dundas. And I've kind of come up with a little backstory to explain why the locos are so much taller than the coaches, which is due to space restrictions. The coaches have to be propelled through the town. There's no run-round loop, so the driver has to be able to see over the top. I'm thinking maybe there'd have to be a guy with a flag walking in front, something like that. And yeah, the engines are kind of weathered because, as I say, I want them to sort of look like they're on their last legs. Now, an important piece of rolling stock that I'm going to need is I'm going to need some wagons. And for that I'm going to do a bit of scratch building. So I was going through my narrow gauge stuff and I found these Pico underframe kits, which I think will be perfect. I want to scratch build some wagons for use on the quayside. Fish wagons. I'm thinking flat wagons, maybe 1 plank or 2 plank. Shouldn't be too difficult to construct. And I'm thinking maybe I'll see if I can do a couple of vans either from kits or maybe scratch build if I'm feeling brave. Mostly though, with stuff on this layout, I want to scratch build wherever I can. I don't want to use ready to plant buildings or kit built buildings if it's at all practical. So aside from the railway and aside from the Fisherman's Chapel, the features I would like to include are, I would like a crane on the quayside. Now I have this this Metcalf goods yard crane kit which might fit the bill. I'm sort of worried it might look a bit flat compared to everything else, so might have a rummage around to see if I've got anything else. I would like to include a small lighthouse. There is such a thing on the end of the pier at St Ives, a small thing that marks the entrance to the harbour, which would be it'll be difficult to build. I'm sort of hoping it will be within my abilities. But there's no hurry with this at all. Like, this is a project where I really do want to take my time. I'd like to include a fishing boat being unloaded. Now, I'm sort of in two minds whether I want to use a kit or scratch build one. I have ordered a rather inexpensive resin kit online, which should be with me in the next few days. But it would be cool to be able to build a boat. So I don't know. Maybe I'll see if I've got room for 2 boats. I'm thinking I want another building to go with my chapel. Maybe a pub. I'm not sure how much space I'm going to have, though. If not a pub, then I want something that looks different from the chapel. I don't want everything to look all grey. But yeah, that's basically what I want to do. That's my project. It will, I hope, keep me sane during lockdown. It'll give me a chance to try out some new techniques. And at the risk of sounding terribly selfish, it's a project that's more for me. And that sounds awful, but so much of my modelling is stuff that I do for this channel, like demonstrating things. It's stuff that I'm doing for the benefit of other people rather than stuff I want to do because it is fun for me. I'm kind of hoping this will be both, though. Like, because I know I've had a lot of interest on my videos on 009 narrow gauge models, and I do want to demonstrate the techniques I use, which should be different from anything else you've seen on this channel so far. So, yeah, that's the plan. I am going to build this layout. It's going to be called Porthmeyn, which is Cornish for stone beach, which, well, to be honest, I hate punny layout names, but I was coming up with a sort of name for the town. Porth I wanted in there, like Porthia, which is the Cornish name for St Ives, or Porthleven, and I was kind of trying to think of the qualities I wanted, and I was thinking of how this whole thing kind of started out, because I was experimenting with stonework, so I just kind of thought, well, what's the Cornish for stone? And it turns out it's men or main. And Porthmeyn just rolled off the tongue so well that I thought, oh, well, why not use that then? So that's what it's going to be called. So I will see you again soon, when we will be laying the foundations for Porthmeyn. See you then. Cheerio.